So welcome everybody to another episode of the Let's Talk Mortgages podcast, brought to you by Green Mortgage and Protection. And this week we're talking about everything about the legal process. So we've brought another local expert with us. We have Cheryl leaning from James Legal this week. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, James.
So thank you for joining us. Obviously we're trying to educate people about the buying process, everything that goes into it. So obviously this week we are talking about the legal process. So tell us a little bit about you, your journey into legals and kind of where you are now.
So I've been working in the legal profession for over 30 years now. Started off in Scunthorpe, but I've been in Hull for the last 30 years. I now deal mainly with property. I've done it all my career, but I've also dipped in and out of different things. So I've done a bit of wills and probate, I've done a bit of family law, I've done some litigation. So usually anything that crops up, I've got an idea, if not necessarily how to deal with it myself, where to signpost somebody. So quite full-rounded experience.
So what was it about the property side that you enjoy the most?
I don't think there is an enjoy in property. It's all quite painful. I just think I probably had a stronger resilience than other people. Exactly, thicker skin. So I just seemed to fall into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of our clients are kind of first-time buyers or people that have gone through the process once and then they're moving on to property number 2 and 3 and things like that. So give us a kind of an insight into what actually takes place when buying a house. So from the point of putting an offer in to you getting the keys, kind of what does that look like?
So our job on the legal side is to make sure that the property you're buying is what you're going to get, and that the sellers have got the right to sell you what they're purporting to sell. Yep. So making sure that the piece of land itself is what you're getting and there's no extra bits or bits that are missing. Making sure that you've got all the rights that you need to use that property. You've got rights of access, you've got rights of drainage, that you've got the right for all your services and electricity to attach to it, and that there's nothing else on that property that is going to cost you money, where you might have to pay some extra charges to somebody else, and that everything else has been removed, all the financial charges, so that when you own it, you've got it as you want to. It's not foolproof. There could be issues that crop up that are unseen because we only ever see the pieces of paper, the title documents. We don't actually visit the property. So a buyer really needs to make sure that they've had a good survey and that they know that structurally the actual bricks and mortar of the building is okay, and they're not going to have lots of expense when they move in.
Yeah, I mean, we see it with our clients is people are buying properties all over the country, all different types of properties, and you think, well, how hard can it be when I can see where my fences are? That's my land, which isn't necessarily always true, is it?
No, it's not always the case. The title deeds, most properties are registered. So you've got a piece of paper from the land registry with a plan showing a nice, neat outline of what you own. The title deeds themselves might also say who's responsible for certain boundaries. What it says on paper and what happens in practice can be two different things. Over years, you might have somebody that's responsible for a boundary and maybe the person next door hasn't maintained it. So they've put their own boundary up and then they treat that as theirs. You can have encroachment. You might have a hedge that's quite a big bushy hedge that's not been trimmed back, so nobody's quite sure where the boundary lies. The land registry themselves, the plans are quite a small scale. And it's difficult to actually show where that boundary is. So it's never to the centimetre. So
I suppose if you replace the fence or go from a fence to a wall or a hedge to a wall, it's never going to be in the exact same spot it was when the plans were drawn up.
Exactly.
So that can sometimes cause an issue, I guess.
It can cause an issue. Most people are reasonable and can get things sorted out. But,
most people.
Yeah, exactly. But there's always going to be issues that arise from time to time. So we do what we can to try and minimise that, but there's never a black and white answer.
Because what's the general rule? Because me and my wife, we've had 3 or 4 houses, and when it comes to working out the boundary, there's a general rule where if you're looking at the house or away from the house, the one that you're responsible to maintain is usually the right hand side?
It's not always the case. If you buy in a property that's on an estate, a development, then usually the original developer will have set out quite clearly on a plan who's going to be responsible, and they will usually have maybe taken the right hand side of the property is yours, and it's like a domino effect down the street.
Yeah.
Sometimes there can be party boundaries. So, for example, in the centre of Hull, there's lots of terraces, and they're usually party walls or party fences. So you and your neighbours are jointly responsible for maintaining those.
So when you get those like bickering arguments about, oh, the fence is broken, that's your responsibility to fix it, actually you're both responsible.
Quite often you can be both responsible for it, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that's the good thing about having good neighbours, I suppose, and the bad thing about having bad neighbours is working things out like that. So yeah, obviously your job is to make sure the house that somebody's buying is, you can do what you think you can do with it. You're buying it with the intention of, this is mine, I can live here how I want. I don't have anybody coming knocking on my door saying you owe me this or you can't use that because I've got the right to do that.
Yeah.
So when we speak to clients, is the first question we get asked is, when do I pay money and how much is it? So standard practice is to pay for the searches up front.
Yeah, we always ask for some money on account to get the ball rolling, to be able to get searches submitted, make the initial checks, do the ID checks on the client, make sure that they are who they say they are.
Yep.
And that's usually all you pay for initially. And then when you're ready to actually exchange contracts, which is when you're legally committed to buy that house and the seller's legally committed to sell it to you, at that point, that's when you pay a deposit. It's usually 10%. It can sometimes be less. Quite often people are getting 95% mortgages, for example, so they might only pay 5% deposit when they exchange contracts. The rest of it, they pay when they actually complete, on the day of completion. And so we always want it at least the day before, so we know we've got the money. There's going to be no delays in that money coming through, sending it up a chain. And exchange and completion can be the same day, although we would usually advise to have at least a week in between.
Yeah, it can be quite risky. I know people where that's happened. You're about to exchange, but there's no money in the bank account. The deposit's not come in, or the funds from the lender haven't come in, and
exactly that can be an issue. And at the last minute, someone could just change their minds. And so we would always advise exchange first, and then have at least a week, if not longer, between exchange and completion to get things in place and make sure everything's booked. No last minute hitches.
When you look at the process in this country, it is so antiquated as well. Like you say, until you actually exchange contracts, either party can pull out with little to no consequences, can't they?
That's right. It's no liability. No, I can't speak. No liability on either side until contracts are exchanged.
Yeah. So you could spend money on surveys, mortgage advice, house valuations, all that sort of thing. You can get your removal companies ready because you're aiming to complete for this day, to then find out the day before exchange it's not actually happening.
Yeah. That doesn't happen very often, thankfully. There can be last-minute hitches, or there can be issues getting a date agreed because one party might be ready, but somebody else in that chain might not quite be there. And so you often find people start talking about, they want to know a date. The first thing I get asked is, how quickly can I get my keys? How soon can I move in?
Yeah.
And it's impossible to
We've not
predict
even sent
that.
off the searches yet.
Exactly. We've not sent the searches. We've not seen the paperwork yet. So we don't know what we're going to get. And it's not a case of us, we get the contract and that's it, straight away we can complete. We do the searches for a reason. We do the searches to make sure that there are no issues with that property where maybe somebody's built a big extension in the past, which is why you want to buy that house, because it's got beautiful extension.
Yeah.
But it's not had the correct planning permission, or it's not been signed off by a building inspector.
Yeah.
Or quite often, lots of properties have got restrictive covenants on them, which says that you can't do certain things, or you've got to get permission from the original developer to be able to build that extension. And so if that's not in place, that needs to be sorted out. So they're the sorts of checks that we're making. The searches are also checking things like whether there's been any enforcement action by the council, for example. Maybe 10 years ago, that property wasn't maintained and it was pest control issues or it was an unsafe building. So the council had to go in and do some work.
Right.
If you don't do your search, you won't know that there's still a £15,000 charge on that property that's got to be paid back to the council. And so that can be a bit of an issue when somebody moves in and then finds they've got that big bill to pay. That's what we're checking. This
is what we say to clients is like, because it makes us look really good, because we get the mortgage offer in 2-3 weeks, and it's like, so how long till I get my keys? It's like, well, it could be another few months yet. So we look really quick in comparison, but our job's nowhere near as detailed as what yours is. So what we tell clients is, look, you're paying the solicitor to investigate absolutely everything, because if you do miss something, they've then bought a house on the intention that it turns out they can't do what they want to with the house, and it then falls to you because you missed it. So you do need to take that time, don't you, to double check everything. Exactly.
I mean, you might be buying a brand new property that is absolutely your dream home. And if you moved into it and then find that you've got a restriction that says you can't park a commercial vehicle on it, and you've got a van that you need for work, it's a big issue. So is
that quite common, that sort of like restriction?
It is. It's common if it's a newer property. Lots of new developments have got those conditions on, that you can't park a commercial vehicle or you can't park a caravan.
Is that forever or just for a certain amount of time?
It's forever. A restrictive covenant is forever.
Yeah. Because I moved into a new build last year. I mean, it wasn't. We don't have the restriction on where we live, but I've heard other people that have bought new builds where there's things like you can't amend the front garden for 2 years.
Yeah.
If they're still building on the site, well, if you're in a certain location on the site, you're kind of like the advert for the other properties. So they don't want you to amend the front garden, like the front door, even for 2 years.
Yeah, and that 2 years is probably quite an easy one. Most of them are usually forever. So you can't alter the external appearance without getting the consent. It's a way of making sure that they control the development and maintain a standard. Quite often you find where a front garden, you can't fence it, you've got to keep it open plan. That might be an issue if you've got dogs or kids, and you want to make sure they're secure. But there's always restrictions about service strips and not building on those, and making sure that you keep them open. It might be a visibility display as well for the roads, making sure that you're not blocking anything as people come round a corner.
Yeah, because I suppose it's not just the house you're buying, there's everybody else around you that you need to be mindful of as well, because you're only buying this section of land. What happens next door to you, you have no control over, but you need to be aware of it, don't you, really?
Yeah, exactly. So those restrictive covenants are usually uniform on that particular estate. And it's more common to have those sorts of restrictions where it's been a building development of lots of the same sorts of houses. If you're buying a property that's a one-off, that's a bit more rural or in a village, you might not have the same restrictions.
So obviously you're sending off for the searches day one. That's where part of the money's paid on account. Typically, how long do the searches take to come back?
It depends on the local authority. It depends where it is. And it also depends on the time of year. Usually we say 3 to 4 weeks. It can be quicker. It can be a week to 2 weeks. Sometimes it can take longer as well. And recently we had a bit of a delay with searches because of the general election.
Right.
All the councils had diverted all their resources into getting ready for a general election. So they didn't have the manpower or the room, the space, to actually carry out the searches. So they were all pushed back a couple of weeks.
I guess it depends on the market as well. So if all of a sudden everybody wants to buy a house at the same time, the local council are overrun with requests for searches, so that can put them under pressure as well.
And that often coincides with annual leave time when people are on holiday as well.
So August.
Exactly. There's definitely sort of a bit of a pattern with the timings for things, that people tend to get busier after Easter, then it goes quiet again at the start of the summer holidays, and then this time of year it starts ranking up again as people are wanting to get properties sorted and moved in maybe for Christmas. Yeah,
because I'm guessing there's kind of a bit of a delay between what we do and kind of what you do. So our busiest times of the year are January and September. January because New Year, this is the year that I'm going to buy a house, or we find a lot of people split up after Christmas because one more Christmas with a partner that you don't really like is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Or you just have the in-laws round and you realise your house isn't big enough, so it's right, we are moving.
Yeah.
So January is usually the busiest time of year for us, but then also September as well, because you have all those people that have caught up from summer holidays or they've had the kids off and that sort of thing. So they're our busiest points of the year. So you might be maybe kind of like one step after that, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. And a lot of it sort of depends on things like somebody's been on holiday and they realise they don't want to spend any more time with that person. Or it could be that they're coming out of college and they're getting jobs and it's they've had 3 years of their accounts, so they know they can get a mortgage now. So there's lots of things that affect it, lots of factors.
So 3-4 weeks, searches have now come back. Your next job is to work your way through literally every document that comes back for the house. And then that's when inquiries are raised.
That's right. That's why we check in to make sure that they haven't breached any of the restrictive covenants that are on that property, that they've got all the right certificates for any work that they've had done to that property, that there haven't been any issues with shared driveways, for example. And then once we've got the searches back, they're clear. Once we've got your mortgage offer, and once the sellers have replied to any inquiries that we've raised and all the answers are okay, then at that stage, that's when we're ready to get a report together, get everything signed up, and hopefully start talking dates.
Yeah.
A lot of it depends on how big a chain is. In an ideal world, you're buying a property that's empty and there's only you and the seller, and you haven't got to worry about anything else.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often. More often than not, there's somebody who further up is buying another house that might not be quite ready.
Yeah.
Or there might be somebody down the bottom of the chain who hasn't got their mortgage sorted yet. And so if you're stuck in a chain, you've got to wait for every part of that chain to be ready to be able to discuss the dates.
Or the top of the chain could be somebody that's passed away, the house is going through probate, obviously that can cause a delay as well.
Absolutely. If you're waiting for probate, then you could be waiting 3 or 4 months for that to come through at least. The worst case scenario is where you're ready to buy a house, you do to complete the next day, and then the seller dies. And
Has that happened?
It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen occasionally. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about that.
No. I think sometimes that's kind of where, not people are dying, but the stress that people feel is because you're in a chain, you are kind of playing Chinese whispers, aren't you? You've got to send it up the chain because you can't jump the solicitor next to you to go to the next one. You have to pass it along, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. It can be challenging because we're only allowed to speak to the people that are immediately either side of us. If it's all solicitors that are local and everybody knows everybody else, then sometimes you can. And if you've got a good estate agent as well, who knows what's happening in the chain, estate agents can talk to everybody. We can only talk to our client and the other party's solicitors. We can't talk to the other party directly. We can only speak to people further up a chain if we know who they are.
Yeah.
And they don't have to give us any answers.
Yeah.
There's not any legal obligation for them to do that. So it can be a bit of a challenge getting all of the information together. And like you say, it can be Chinese whispers. You can also get situations where somebody says one thing to the estate agent, something else to the solicitor. And the solicitor is bound by confidentiality, so they might not be able to say that actually there is a reason why they're not able to give dates or give a response. So it can be very frustrating because you've got no control over that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, if you're limited to who you can talk to, if they don't respond, all you can do is just keep chasing and chasing. There's phone calls, there's emails. You can't physically go around there and shake somebody for an answer, can you? So
No, people do sometimes try. Not very often, but it does sometimes happen. I think the biggest frustration with buying a house is the communication. And we always make sure our clients have got our direct dial telephone numbers, they've got our mobile numbers, they've got our email addresses, so they can go straight to us, they can go straight to the conveyancer, and we will try and answer that if we can. It's not always a black and white answer that they want to hear, but at least they know that we're in control of it, or that we're trying to get the information for them. I think the frustration comes when they're not hearing anything.
Yeah.
And it can be a waiting game sometimes, and you've just got to wait for things to pan out, and they usually do. But
it can be quite a drawn out process. I think Rightmove released a statistic the other week where I think the average sale to completion is now like 118 days.
right,
I believe.
what's that in week money?
Just under 4 months.
Right, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tend to say it's anywhere between 8 and 14 weeks if you're just doing a standalone purchase. It can be a really big variation on that. Something could take 2 or 3 weeks. If you're a cash buyer, if you don't want your searches and the
don't
properties,
need a survey or anything.
You don't need a survey. If it's a nice, clean title that you're buying, there's no issues. It can be really quick. If you're buying a property where it might be a leasehold, for example, they always take longer because you're waiting for more information from more people. You need to hear from the landlord or the managing agents. You need to know all the service charges are paid. You need to know if there's any cladding issues that's also causing problems.
Which obviously came in since the Grenfell disaster.
Exactly, that's right. So there's all sorts of things that need to be checked out that can have an impact on how long it takes.
Yeah, because buyers come to us like, you sit down, right, this is the mortgage that we're going to apply for, great, when do I get my keys? It's like, well, I'm kind of out of that control, but we try and give people like a typical time frame, and you say typically 3 to 4 months, but it depends how many moving parts there are. Who are you buying from? What's their situation? And then what's the situation ahead of them? Like you say about leaseholds, with it being leasehold, you've got to find obviously details of the freehold and then details of the leasehold. So that can double the workload.
It can.
So we're kind of talking about buying as part of a chain. It's easy to understand why that could take longer because there's more people to pass it up and down the chain. But obviously new builds, they can take a while. Even if the house is ready, there's still extra paperwork for new build as well?
There is. Usually with a new build, a developer wants an exchange as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
The property might not yet be built. You might be buying it off plan. If you're lucky, they might have got the walls up. But usually you would exchange contracts quite early on, and then the completion is going to be on notice in a few months' time. They'll give you an anticipated completion date. They'll say when they think it's going to be ready, but the developer cannot control that. They don't know whether they're going to have issues with materials, with labour. The council might not come round and give it an inspection and pass it off because you need a final certificate before you can get it. The issue then you've got is that you need your mortgage in place to be able to exchange contracts, but your mortgage is only valid for a certain period. So then you might have an issue where that might expire. You've got to try and get it renewed. Interest rates might have changed, so you might not get the same product. Your personal circumstances might have changed, so you might not be in the same position that you were in financially. So it is a bit of a risky game sometimes.
Yeah, we say that to people buying new builds, is lenders give you an extension, whereas most lenders in any other transaction, they won't offer an extension. 99% will give you an extension on a new build, sometimes up to 6 months, so you can get a full year to move in because they know these things crop up. And I suppose especially as well when they're trying to register properties for the first time that aren't on land registry, the roads haven't been adopted yet, so there's a lot more moving parts into it than probably what people realise. So yeah, obviously searches have been done, inquiries have been answered, the mortgage offers come in, so you've gone through the terms and conditions of that. You've answered other queries from either the buyer or the seller, because when you're instructed, you'll send out a pack, won't you, to clients. So what's in that pack to get the ball rolling for you?
So if we're acting for a buyer, we want to know that they are who they say they are. So we need to have all their ID. We need to do anti-money laundering checks to make sure the money that they're putting into it has come from a nice clean source. So that if in the future there's ever any issues with that property, you can show they've got a paper trail. So that's really all we need from a buyer at that stage. Money on account, ID, proof of where the money's coming from. They will then do their survey. They might want a separate one if the lender doesn't offer a survey. I think probably some of your mortgage lenders will offer a survey as part of it. Others will just be a basic valuation, won't they? Yeah,
sometimes we're just going on to value the property, tell you what it's worth, nothing more, nothing less. Some give you the option to upgrade it to like a level 2. So yeah, we always recommend to clients, like, look, you need to cover yourself. Yes, it's going to be £300-400, but if it identifies something that's going to potentially cost you thousands in the future, then it's the best thing to do.
Exactly. It's peace of mind. It's worth doing because it means at that stage you can still negotiate. So if you find that there is an issue where maybe there's a damp problem, then you can make sure that you either factor that into the price that you're paying, or you get the seller to fix it before you move in, so you haven't got that disruption.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if the issue's quite obvious, a mortgage valuer that's going around just for the valuation, they pick up on things and make notes as well. And we've had it where a damp issue has been highlighted. And we're talking to our clients saying, look, it's not the end of the world. You might get this fixed before you move in. Still pay the asking price, but the property's going to be in a better condition than when you bought it. Or because of that, you can renegotiate. Kind of the same as a down valuation, really.
Yeah.
But if you're selling, obviously same sort of documents because you've got the onward purchase as well. But then you start filling out like the fixture and fittings form, don't you?
That's right. If you're selling a property, there's a little bit more homework that you've got to do first of all. So there's always a fixtures and fittings form, fittings and contents.
Yeah.
What you're leaving, what you're taking. There's then a property information form, and that's quite detailed. There's a new one that's just come out actually, and that tells a buyer which boundaries you've maintained. Whether or not you've had any issues with your neighbours, whether or not you pay any extra charges for anyone. If you're on a new development, for example, there might be a really lovely communal area that everybody can use and a nice children's park, but you might have an annual service charge to pay for that, so you need to know what that's going to be. So it's collecting that sort of information. And we would then issue a contract pack to a buyer's solicitors that's got the contract in, that's got all the title documents in, that's got the property information form, fittings and contents forms, so that the buyer's solicitors can start doing their homework as well.
Because I remember filling that in when we moved, and it's like it asks for every item in the kitchen. Is it integrated? Is it freestanding? Is it staying? Is it going? Has it been maintained, serviced, that sort of thing? What's the weirdest and wonderful, like most weirdest thing you've seen on that form? I've seen people that have ticked yes to taking the carpets with them.
Some people take light bulbs.
How that's going to work, I don't know. I mean, when we bought our previous house, the lady was like, "There's these two like chandeliers that I'm going to take." I was like, "Good," because it's one less thing for me to avoid. I have to keep ducking for them. But what's like the strangest thing you've seen on a fittings and fixtures form?
Actually, no, I can't think. There was somebody who didn't want to move until his prize pumpkin was ready, and he was taking. They were taking things out of the gardens, and you do get some people that will take light bulbs. They'll take their favourite shower screen, and they'll move in and realise that there's nothing that's preventing them from having a shower. Or you can never really legislate for how weird some people can be.
Somebody's going to try and charge us like £20 to keep the sky dish. I was like, well, take it, I'll go buy a new one. I was like, oh, actually, I'll second thought, sure, you can keep it for the sake of £20.
Yeah, some people can be quite mercenary, and particularly if they've sold the property for what they think's less than it was, they want to try and negotiate on absolutely everything. You can then get to the other end of the extreme where somebody sells a property, you move in and you find they've not taken anything out. That happens more maybe with probate sales, and you move in and you find that Nana's knickers are still in the drawer. I mean, that has happened. It's always best to maybe go and just have a check around that property before you exchange contracts, just to make sure
like
it's
a second or third viewing.
Yeah, definitely, just to make sure, because once you exchange contracts, you're committed to buy that house in whatever state it's in.
Yeah.
So it's always best just to check that they're not leaving everything, or they've left everything in the garden. And think we had somebody who had left all their ducks and thought
like porcelain ducks.
No, not porcelain ducks, actually quacking
right.
live ducks with a pond, and they were planning on coming and picking them up a couple of weeks later, and thought it was all right just to leave them, which the ducks would probably be fine, but the buyers were a bit perturbed.
Yeah, it's not what you expect when you're walking into your brand new garden and there's like 10 live ducks.
I mean, I'd be quite pleased with that personally, but not everybody wants that.
I know we left the shed in the last house we bought. We got this metal shed that we put together. Me and my wife put it together. We nearly got divorced over putting it together because the instructions were in German. You needed an engineering degree to put it together. Because it was metal, I cut my hands open God knows how many times. So once it was up, I was like, this is staying here. This is now a fixture of the house. We left that for the buyers. So hopefully to this day, guys, if you are watching, I hope you are enjoying the shed. It saved us a massive headache in taking that away. So also we mentioned about nothing set in stone until you exchange. You want everything sorted for exchange, because we've had people who for one reason or another have been waiting longer than what they expected for the mortgage offer. Legals have flown through and like, right, I can exchange now. It's like, no, don't do that without a mortgage. I mean, the mortgage is 90% of the purchase price. Do not put yourself in a position where you're legally bound to buy without all the bits that you need. So then you set the completion date. So we were saying that's usually a week later, so everyone can draw down money, pay the deposits and things like that. Do you find completion date is normally a Friday for everybody?
It's traditionally, it tends to be a Friday for people that are moving into a property. It doesn't have to be. It can be any working day of the week. So Monday to Friday, it could be. People tend to like a Friday because most people have got a weekend off.
Yep.
It means that they can get things moved in and they can get things sorted out before they go back to work on a Monday. So I think that's why it tends to be a Friday.
Yeah.
We like it to be any other day of the week because
so it's not all on one day.
Exactly. It's not all crammed into one bottleneck.
Yeah.
Our cashiers teams definitely like it to be spread out over the week if possible.
Yeah, and I know like I've had clients where I've asked for a Wednesday. I was like, any particular reason? It's like, well, everyone else wants Friday, so if I get Wednesday, then it should go through quicker. I'll get the choice of the removal van, stuff like that. So.
Exactly. Yeah, removal companies would like it to be spread out more throughout a week because otherwise you're all trying to compete for the same vans on the same day.
Yeah.
And they might have another job to go to, and if you've got a delay getting the keys or there's been a delay with the money coming up the chain and they haven't been able to empty your van, then that would have a knock-on effect with everybody else. So,
yeah, we've had clients ringing us at like 9 o'clock in the morning saying, well, my removal van's on the drive, it's full, I've not completed yet. And I said, well, it is only 9 o'clock, like banks don't open until 9, then they send the money up the chain. So again, you might tell us otherwise. We usually say to people, you'll probably get the call around lunchtime to say the money's moved.
That's what we say. Typically, it's usually around lunchtime. We cannot control exactly what time it's going to be. We can't predict exactly when you can go and get your keys. And there sometimes can be issues. Recently, there's been a few international outages with banks where nothing's moved. And there's no way anyone can control that. If you've got solicitors that are fairly reasonable, then and are able to talk to one another, you can pass undertakings to one another so that people can physically move and let everything else catch up. That doesn't happen as much as it used to, mainly because the solicitors might be the other side of the country. You've never worked with them before. You don't have the same trust that you might have with local solicitors that you're working with on a regular basis. So we try and minimise as many risks as we possibly can and make sure that we've got time between exchange and completion to get the money in. We usually ask for the money at least the day before so that we know first thing in the morning that can go straight in the system, and it's usually there fairly quickly. But we just cannot control it once it goes into the banking system. Because
once you exchange, you will then send out the completion statement, which will have obviously the deposit that's owed. So can you send that over? The money coming from the lender, and then there'll be probably the breakdown of your fees for doing the conveyancing, if there's any stamp duty that's payable, and then there'll either be a surplus or a shortfall depending on whether you're buying or selling and buying.
Yeah. That's exactly that. We prepare that before exchange, and we provide that to our clients as part of the documents that they need to sign, the contracts, the transfers, the mortgage deeds, stamp duty forms, and we give them the completion statement so they know financially what things are going to look like and what their obligation is. If they're a buyer, there might be a first-time buyer that's got Help to Buy mortgage, Help to Buy ISA, or a lifetime ISA. They need to be getting that account closed because that can take a process to come through, and we don't want any last minute hitches finding the money still stuck in that account. We can't get access to it. So that's the sort of homework that a buyer needs to be doing, getting those ISAs closed so that we can request the bonus and make sure the money's there. Yeah,
because you have to request the bonus, don't you, to make sure that it's actually been used for a house sale.
That's right.
You're not saying I'm going to go buy a house and then go spend it on a holiday or something.
Exactly, or put a hot tub in the garden. No, I mean, I suppose technically you could do that because all we're saying is that you are buying this house and you're buying it for this amount of money, and that bonus is being used towards that purchase. But you've not put that money in at exchange. So you can't use your bonus as part of your exchange deposit.
Yeah.
You can get it back afterwards. So whatever money you've already put in, you effectively get that back to then go and spend on your nice IKEA wardrobes.
Brand new sofa and
exactly.
Yeah. We find that's the second thing people do. So I make the phone call, mortgage has been approved, you can guarantee that weekend they're on the way to IKEA. I was like, for the love of God, please do not put it on credit. Just if you're going to buy it, do it out of savings. But whenever we speak to people, we say the same thing is, you've got a deposit of X. Don't be counting on the bonus because, again, we're trying to reduce risk. 9 times out of 10 it's here on time, but if it's not, then we have an issue with the completion date. So treat it as what it is, a bonus. That covers the new bed, the new sofa, the decoration. Use what you've got now. How can, so we're talking about average time is 118 days. What would be like your top tips to help people slightly speed up the process?
So if it's a buyer, then all you really need to do is get your identity documents ready. We send a link to people's phones, so it takes 5 minutes and they can just do it on the phone. So you're not having to physically walk in with your documents and get them copied in anywhere or certified. We do all electronic ID checks for people these days. And make sure you've got the evidence of the source of where your money's coming from. If you're getting the money as a gift from family members, then we need to get their ID checked as well. We need to have their evidence of where their money's coming from, that they're lending to you or giving to you. Usually mortgage lenders will also require like a gifted deposit letter to say it is a gift and that they're not going to have any interest in the property. If you're a seller, then get together any paperwork for that house for anything you might have had done. If you've had new windows, get your fence certificates. If you've had a new boiler installed, get your compliance certificate in place. Buyers usually ask for you to have gas and electric checks, get central heating checked. It's not a legal obligation for a seller to do that, but it does help smooth the process if you've got that in place.
We're seeing more and more people ask for that now, or that's sometimes what's holding it up because you don't have to do it. You tend to get quite far down the line. It's like, do you know what? I actually would like that to be done. So if it's £50 for a gas safety, maybe 100 for electric, for £150, it's just worth getting it done, isn't it?
It is. It's worth getting it in place just so that you can show that it's got a nice clean bill of health. A seller doesn't have to do it, and if they don't, they've got to allow a buyer to have access, and so you can send your own contractor in and get it checked out as well. That's a good way of getting it sorted. And then know how long you've got to give notice to close any accounts where you might have your savings. If you've got it in a lifetime ISA, some lenders or some financial organisations, they'll want maybe a month. Usually comes through quicker, but they won't guarantee it'll come any quicker. So you've just got to make sure that you time that right. If you're still contributing to your Help to Buy ISA account, you might want to wait until maybe the month before you're likely to complete and then get that closed.
We always tell people keep feeding it because you're going to get the 25%, but up until a point, because you're going to get a little bit more back. So, and I guess if you're renting as well, you have to serve a month's notice on your landlord as well. So you need to try and, I think we see people who are renting under a little bit more stress for that reason because they don't want to pay rent and the first mortgage payment, which is often higher, within the same month. So they try to time it perfectly. And
it's always a good idea to make sure that sellers know that you've got to give notice if you're in rented accommodation. You'll need a month between exchange and completion to be able to get that sorted and not have an overlap. What we often then find is that when it gets to completion date and everybody's ready and they're all really keen to get something sorted as quickly as possible, there'll be a lot of pressure to agree an earlier date. If you're getting that pressure, say, well, okay, I'll do it earlier as long as you contribute towards my overlap of rent and mortgage. And then all of a sudden, it's not as important that they complete by that date because they don't want to spend any more money. So then they'll back off a little bit with the pressure, and you can agree a date that suits everybody without. It's a stressful process without people putting unnecessary pressure on.
I think everybody thinks that they are the most important person in the world as well. So it's like sometimes people forget there's other people involved, whether it be another party in terms of buying or selling, a solicitor or something like that. But I think the underlying principle to help speed it up is just being proactive rather than waiting for something to come in. It's like, right, I'm probably going to need this just do it now. Like when the paperwork comes in, I was guilty of this last year because fixtures and fittings, we were leaving everything. I was just ticking every box. It was like boom, boom, boom. I'd missed 3 of them, so I'd sent it off, did read it. You've missed these 3. I'm like, right, do that one. And then because I was just trying to rush it through, you keep missing things. So it's like be proactive, but then also be detailed as well. Make sure you're giving everything. It's best to do it once than have back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to get rid of back and forth completely, are you? But if you can try and reduce it, because of, again, how it's got to go up and down, it could be a week, 2 weeks before you get the response. You've missed that. So yeah, just taking your time with it, I guess, and being proactive.
Yeah, trying to be careful and detailed, and then once your solicitors have got everything, they should then send it across to the other side. Hopefully they'll check it fairly quickly and come back. You can get delays where they might not have looked at it until the searches have come back in, and so then you get a flurry of questions that seem to be at last minute that you've got to sort out. It's very rare that those questions are things that can't be answered, and they're being asked for a reason. They're not being asked to be awkward or to deliberately delay things. And I would say that usually if somebody isn't able to give a date, there's a reason for it. Nobody sits back and thinks, "Oh, I've sold my house, but I'm just gonna wait now because I can't be bothered to respond." Everybody wants things to be sorted out. So if
You
there
included, because you guys don't get
Exactly.
paid until it goes through.
Exactly. I mean, I would much sooner get a matter in, file in, get it dealt with in a couple of weeks, send the client off happy, get the bill paid, next one in, thank you very much. I'd much rather do that. So if there are delays, it's never really because somebody isn't doing something just because they don't want to. There's usually a very good reason that's holding something up. And if you've got a good solicitor that you're talking to and you're communicating with, they'll have an idea of what that is, and they'll be able to sort of manage everybody's expectations.
Because we get it with like lenders and underwriters and stuff, and you think like, why are you asking this question? It's like, it's common sense, but you forget I've spoken to the client, I know their situation, the underwriter doesn't. So a bit like when you're asking certain questions, you don't know the property, you don't know the client's like situation. All you've got is what has been presented on those forms, really.
Exactly. We don't physically go and inspect every individual property. We don't see it.
You'd never get anything done, would you, if you had to?
We wouldn't. So unless somebody tells us that there's solar panels on a roof, we wouldn't know that. That's not going to be something that's shown on the title deeds from the land registry, for example. So if there's anything like that needs checking, we need to know about that.
I wasn't actually going to ask about solar panels, but now you've brought it up. We often see some issues with the solar panels. So kind of like, what is the main issue with solar panels, and what's the best way to get around it, I guess?
So there's all sorts of things that can crop up. So if the solar panels are owned outright, then usually it's a case of just making sure that when they were installed, you've got your building regs in place, and that you're going to be able to get the feed-in tariff transferred to you.
Yeah.
That's usually all that's needed if they're actually owned outright.
Yeah.
The issues tend to arise where you don't actually own the solar panels on the roof. There's a lease for the roof space, and it's a separate company. There's a company that put thousands of them on all over the country, a shade greener, and some of the leases that they used aren't suitable for lenders these days, and so you've got to go back to the company and you've got to get that changed, and the companies have changed over the years because they don't have the same funding that they had, so it's trying to find the right people to be able to answer those questions.
Which can probably take you right down a rabbit hole.
It can take time if you don't get to the right person, if you haven't got the right references. Not everybody's got the paperwork in place because they didn't realise they needed it. The solar panels have gone up, they've had free electricity, but they've not really thought about anything else. So if it's a lease of roof space, then that's tends to be where the issues arise with solar panels.
So if for potential buyers, if they saw solar panels, that would be the first question to ask the selling agent.
Do you own them outright, or are they on a lease?
Yeah.
That's the main question to ask initially. It will show that on the title deeds.
Right.
If it's a lease of the airspace above it, then that will actually be on the title deeds. It won't be if they're owned outright.
Because if people want to do their own research before they go to the point of putting an offer in, mortgage application, instructing a solicitor, you can actually go on the land registry yourself, can't you, and get the majority of the documents. Is it like £13 now?
Well, it's £3 per document for us.
Right.
When we go on for the portal. So I'm not sure what it would cost actually
Someone's
for an
had an extra
individual.
tenner out of me somewhere.
I think somebody has. I think if you go direct to the land registry,
Yeah.
each document is £3. If you
Yeah.
go through some of the maybe third party packages that are offering it, they've probably charged you an extra premium for that. So yeah, if you're looking on, go directly to the land registry website rather than some of the others. That'll be landregistry.gov.co.uk.
Yeah, because I remember, so we've got a number of buy-to-let properties, and I think we had the same issue with that. And I think it's like an issue with the back garden as well. So it's like, yeah, for the sake of, well, £3 apparently, not 13. You can do a bit of research yourself, and you actually get the documents in real time, don't you? You can actually download them then and there.
Yeah, you can, and that's for any property that is registered. Not all properties are registered.
Yeah.
If it's an older property that somebody's not moved since the 70s or before, then it might not be registered, in which case you can't find any of that information out. But if it's a property that's been sold within the last 30 odd years, then it'll have its own title number at the land registry. You can get a copy of the plan, you can get a copy of the title register, you can get a copy of any other documents that affect that. So there might be an old conveyance that's got the restrictive covenants in it, for example. There might be a deed of grant where somebody else has got a right of way over a shared driveway. Those sorts of things, and you can get copies of them, and it's £3 a document.
Yeah, because I remember speaking to solicitors before, and they said, funnily enough, houses that have sold more and more, they've got bigger files on them because they've passed through more sets of hands, so more things have been checked. So weirdly enough, those cases can go through quicker, as opposed to, like you're saying, a new build where it's not been registered yet, nobody's seen the file yet, or a property that was sold before the land registry was being updated. So yeah, it is luck of the draw sometimes, isn't it?
It is. Each one's different. That's why we can't give black and white answers for everything, because each matter is different.
Yeah, like how long's a piece of string sometimes?
Yeah, there's lots of variables that you just can't control, and everything's got to be in place before you can actually progress something.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for 40 minutes about legal. This is actually our longest podcast so far. I mean, we've only done 4, but this is the longest one we've done, and who'd have thought it'd be the legal process that we'd spend the most time talking about. So thank you for that. I have got one last question. So obviously, we would like people to use you guys at James Legal, but for those that are looking for a solicitor of their own to handle buying or selling or both, what would you say makes a good solicitor so they can ask the right questions before instructing somebody?
I think it's having a good relationship with somebody and being able to communicate with them. I would always recommend that if you are looking for a solicitor, if you haven't had one before, ring round, get some quotes, speak to people. You'll get a feel just from that telephone conversation, whether or not it's somebody you want to work with and what your experience is like.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't necessarily say go for the cheapest either, because you're usually getting what you pay for.
Yeah.
And there are online comparison sites, and if it is purely and simply just down to the pennies that you're interested in, fine, go with that. You might not get the service.
Yeah.
But if you've got somebody that you know you can speak to, that you know you can pick the phone up and you can ring them directly, then, I mean, I spend most of my day on the phone speaking to people. And I might not answer the call immediately because I'm talking to somebody else, but then I'll ring them back. So it's making sure that you've got someone you can talk to. If you've got questions, ask them. There's never a daft question. The only daft question is one that you're not asking because you don't know the answer to. So that's the main thing, just somebody you can communicate with. They don't have to be on your doorstep. It doesn't have to be somebody that you can go in to see them, because quite often I never see my clients. I might have a video call with them just to make sure they are who they say they are and they're not an AI bot.
Yeah.
But that's about it really. So we do have people coming into the office. You can pop in. We've got offices in Hull and Beverley, so people will come in, and some people prefer actual pieces of paper as well, and we'll send them documents or they can come in and sign. Most things these days are done electronically by email.
I think face-to-face still does go a long way, especially when more things are done behind a screen now. But yeah, we get that question all the time is, do I have to use somebody local? It's like, well, no, because since COVID, you were able to send everything through the post, through portals, emails, phone calls. People thought you had to go in with your documents and get them signed then and there. the process has come a long way from there. I think the process in England has probably got a long way to go to match places like Scotland, but it has got a lot better to what it used to be. So so someone that's going to be responsive, someone that's got the time to answer your questions, and like with anything. Buy cheap, buy twice. If you're going for somebody cheaper, they're probably working on volume, so you're one of thousands of cases, which is probably at the bottom of the pile for a while. Whoever you get the best feel for, we say the same with us, is you found us through a recommendation, someone's had a good experience, so probably follow that path as well.
Exactly. We do like recommendations, because if it's a recommendation, you've got an extra responsibility, not only to do a good job for the client, but to do a good job for the person that's recommended them. And to make sure that you keep that relationship going. So a lot of our business is repeat business, clients coming back, or clients who've told their family, told their friends, and they're coming to us as well. Yeah,
I mean, we sometimes get people say, I'm using this solicitor. It's like, who the hell is that? Like, it's somewhere in Birmingham. It's like, they're only going to charge me £400. I'm like, right, okay, strap yourself in. Here we go.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes when we get instructions coming through from the estate agents and we see who's on the other side, our hearts sink a little bit, because we know it's going to be difficult getting anything through from those solicitors. The other thing that we often find as well is that clients come to us not because they've used us in the past, but because the people that they bought or sold from have used us, and they like the way we did things more than their other solicitors did. So then they come back to us to say, well, you did that last time, can you do this for me now? It's having a relationship, and once you've got a relationship that works, stick with it. And use them again. Yeah,
it's a bit like your accountant. Like, if you've got a good accountant with a good relationship with your accountant, it's such an effort to go through another one, because they know your business, they know you, they know what you like and how you want to do things. So legals will be no different.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same as if you've got a good mechanic that looks after your car. If you've got a good hairdresser that makes sure that you get your roots done all the time, then stick with that relationship, because it'll work, and you'll then you'll trust them. So you're not as anxious, because if they say that they're going to do something, or if they tell you what the position is and that they'll ring you back or let you know when something changes, you can trust them to do that. So you're not as anxious about it. So I think that's the key. If we've got clients that are as relaxed as possible and have got as minimal stress as possible, our jobs are easier, and we haven't got to carry all that stress and anxiety as well. So it's all down to communication and relationships.
So speaking of communication, we're going to put your details in the show notes when this goes out, so people can find you at James Legal. We'll put whichever contact details you want, so whether that be mobile or landline. We won't be giving all your personal information out, but thank you very much for joining us. It's been really insightful for me, being on one side of it, to find out a bit about what happens behind the curtain, and I'm sure people watching this will take a lot from it as well. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So that wraps up episode 4 of the Let's Talk Mortgages podcast, talking about legals this time around. On next episode, we have Misna Coates joining us from Coates Cover, talking all about life insurance, the need for it, and where that can fit into your life. So thank you very much for joining us.